My name is Ralph Ben-Murgy, and I host a podcast called Not That Kind of Rabbi. Basically, what I'm doing is looking for the spirit in people, what animates them to do what they do, and the kinds of stories they can tell. You know, people believe they don't have a story. Oh, no, I don't really have much of a story. And then when you talk to them or ask them questions, you'll find out everybody has a story and that they're all wonderful. I think it's a really good idea for us not to become parochial, not to just think of ourselves, the Jewish people this, the Jewish people that. So many people of different faiths and different inclinations have so much to offer to us as Jews, but also to the world in general. So I tend to look for the spark in people more than I look for the affiliation in them. To support our work at the CJN, go to thecjn.ca/donate. And if you're Canadian, you'll even get a tax receipt.
Today, as we stand here together, I ask, what has become of the promise of Canada? What does the future of this country hold for Zalman and Pola's 17 great-grandchildren, some of whom are my own kids? Over the past 15 months, we've seen Jewish schools shot at, synagogues firebombed, violent mobs...
That's what it sounded like earlier this week in Ottawa, when Noah Shack, the new interim CEO of CIJA, the Centre for Israel and Jewish Affairs, spoke at Canada's National Holocaust Monument as part of the official ceremony marking the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. It was Shack's nationally televised debut as the new face of CIJA, interim president and CEO. Shack stepped into the job a little over a month and a half ago. On December 10th, the morning after, CIJA announced it fondly thanked the organization's longtime head, Shimon Koffler Fogel, who'd been at the steering wheel since CIJA's founding in 2011, and before that, too, as the director of an earlier version of the lobby group, the Canada-Israel Committee. The press release said Koffler Fogel had, quote, concluded his role, unquote, after nearly 40 years of Jewish advocacy on Parliament Hill, although he told us he'll be sticking around for about 6 months to help oversee the transition while CIJA looks for a permanent replacement. CIJA, under Koffler Fogel, has been among the most active lobbyists, clinching 150 meetings a year with MPs, their staffers, and senior bureaucrats. And he was once ranked by the Hill Times as among the 100 top influencers on Canadian government policy. While CIJA isn't the only officially registered political Jewish lobby group operating in the corridors of power, B'nai B'rith does some of this work too, CIJA says it represents 150,000 Canadians, or fully one-third of the community, members of Jewish federations across the country, which is where CIJA's funding mainly comes from in the form of donations. Shack's new role comes at a critical time for Canada politically, with Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stepping down soon after 10 years, and a new Liberal leader and Prime Minister to be chosen in March. And then, as everyone widely expects, we'll have a federal election that could see the Conservatives sweep to victory. Meanwhile, in Ontario, where most of the country's Jews live, they're going to the polls too. Crucial opportunities, Shack believes, to bring about what he calls badly needed changes in government policy, and why CIJA says they need to take a new approach, evolving their strategies, their tactics, and their tools.
This is about winning. This is about making sure that our community wins. It's not about any one organization or any individual or any group. We need to win this fight. It's the fight for our lives. It's the fight for our children. And in order to do that, we've got to come together.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Thursday, January 30th, 2025. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, and made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Noah Shack certainly didn't need a long onboarding orientation to rejoin CIJA because he's worked there under Shimon Koffler Fogel for a decade, and before that, too, in Ottawa and more recently in Toronto, where Shack lives with his wife and their 5 children. For the last year and a half, Shack was not employed by CIJA, but instead he worked at Toronto's Jewish Federation as their point person for countering anti-Semitism and hate. Conveniently, His new office at CIJA is on the same floor, but just a few doors down, in the same Lipa Green building in Toronto. He says all the hate crimes we see on the news against Jewish institutions right now keep him up at night, and that's part of his motivation for taking the new job. I caught up with him in a boardroom in the Federation Building, just a few days before his nationally televised debut.
Thanks so much for coming here and having me.
This is a big debut for you on a national live stage.
I'm looking forward to being in a position to represent the community and make sure that our voice is heard loud and clear as part of the national commemoration.
So I'm wondering if you can give us a little preview of your message.
Well, I think you can't help but think about the lessons of the Holocaust and the experience of the Jewish people without looking at what's happening today and seeing some very disturbing signs of what is becoming of Canadian society. So I'll be speaking about the promise of Canada that my wife's grandparents had when they came here as survivors of the death camps of Europe. The promise of Canada that they contributed to in building community here, not just in the Jewish community, but more broadly. And how that promise is imperiled right now. Again, not just for the Jewish community, but for all Canadians. When we see hate in our streets, this is an alarming time. The stakes are high, and it's important for Canadian leaders who are participating in this memorial to understand that the Holocaust wasn't something that happened a long time ago that we commemorate. Yes, that's important. But it's the lessons of what came after the Holocaust, the lessons that we learned and implemented in order to build a better future for the survivors and for all Canadians that we need to hold on to. And we need to make sure that those values stay strong and we continue to strengthen them at a time when they're under threat.
I've seen you like a million times on the news and in person at all these events where the police are there, there's been a vandalism or a school shut up, and we've heard these words from government and leaders so many times that this isn't who we are, this is deplorable, we condemn anti-Semitism and all hate. So what can be done? Because it's not getting better.
Yes, we have to care about the here and now and react to these things in order to drive change. But ultimately, we can't just be reacting to the incidents that are happening around us. We have to be thinking forward, not in terms of days and weeks and months, but in terms of years. I'm concerned about what Canada will look like for my kids when they grow up and, God willing, when they have children. This is a fundamental moment for our community and for our country to take those actions, to take those steps forward, whether it's ensuring that there are sufficient resources being deployed for keeping our community safe, whether that's to empower our community to keep ourselves safe, and for police to get the job done, whether that's supporting hate crime units or public order units. And we need to make sure that the laws that exist are being enforced, and also that whenever there's a gap, that we're identifying that gap and moving forward constructively with concrete policy and legislative steps that can fill that gap and ensure that there's accountability. If we don't have accountability here in Canada for anti-Semitism, if our governments and our public institutions, if our schools, hospitals, and universities don't draw a clear and unequivocal line in the sand about what's acceptable and what's not, and make it very clear that Jew hatred has no place in this country, not just saying so, but acting on it and making it so, it's a bleak future ahead of us.
What do you need to see happen that isn't happening?
Number one, we need to see the laws that are on the books enforced consistently. And that requires an end to the buck passing. Very often we'll see police point the finger at municipal leaders point the finger at provincial leaders point the finger at federal leaders. Everyone acknowledges that we have a problem in this country. That doesn't involve any policy change. It doesn't involve any new legislation. That's something that everybody can do right now today if they just put their shoulder into it and lean into getting the job done. The second thing is we need resources to flow to support Jewish communities in ensuring security. The existing program has been great for many years, but it's bureaucratic, it's cumbersome. It takes a long time to get money into institutions to put infrastructure into place.
And they just changed it in the last few months. It used to be called SIP, and now it's called the CCSP, which
and it included a lot more
much
resources.
more money, more percentage of what's covered,
For sure.
less red tape.
And we're grateful for that. And it is an improvement. There is still more work to do to further improve and refine the program. It's mission critical. We don't want to wake up the day after an attack to say, oh, if only the program had been improved, people's lives could have been saved.
So is this one of the reasons for the tax rebate idea that you guys have been lobbying the federal government now to say if we're going to have security guards, then we can claim it on our taxes at the end of the year if you're a shul or what have you?
There are a lot of different ways that we can be doing more and advancing it, and that's our job, is to make sure that we're not just saying mission accomplished before we've gotten to the ideal outcome. I'll give you an example of this with the Hizb ut-Tahrir conference. This was an incident where the organization that has been banned as a terrorist group in the UK and Germany was going to be hosting a conference in Mississauga. We deployed a government relations strategy, a media relations strategy, a digital strategy. We even mobilized community members.
You got like 20,000 people or whatever, 15,000 people writing to the minister or something?
That's right, including people in his own riding with whom he had a personal relationship, calling him up. And I think
this is the minister, David McGuinty, yeah.
In concert with a range of Jewish community organizations, right, and some organizations from other communities as well who took up the charge. They canceled the conference. The government spoke out. Governments at all levels spoke out. The federal government announced that they were starting the listing process to add them to the terrorist list. And so that's a very good outcome. We're not done yet, because until Hizb ut-Tahrir is listed as a terrorist organization, the job's not done. And we have to keep working to ensure that we get that impact. That's the approach that I'd like to take across the board.
What about the bubble legislation? I don't know if you were going to mention bubble legislation. Toronto is studying it. Ottawa's studying it. Yvonne had it, didn't work. So is that still a priority for CIJA?
Absolutely. We need to make sure that people who want to harass and intimidate Jewish Canadians going about their daily lives are not allowed to do so. So whether we need bubble zone legislation in order to accentuate the point and empower police to keep people away from our community infrastructure, or they're going to do it on their own anyway, again, it's the impact that matters.
One of the other issues we should mention right now is the Federal Forum on Anti-Semitism. I know you guys pushed for it. We reported on it. What do you hope will come out of it?
The imperative with this is to have it result in concrete action. We don't need another talk shop. We don't need an Anti-Semitism Summit 2.0 where the Jewish community comes together to talk about how anti-Semitism is impacting our lives. The message is clear. We have a problem in this country, a public safety issue in this country when it comes to hatred targeting Jews and extremism and terrorism that is being fomented and whipped up in our country. There have been, I think, 6 terrorist plots foiled in the last year, a number of them explicitly targeting Jewish community institutions here in Canada and in the United States. Thankfully, those were intercepted. What are we going to? But we shouldn't be waiting for one of these guys to be successful. We need to get at the root causes of this. We need to deal with radicalization, the glorification of terrorism that's happening, and really come up with concrete solutions at all levels of government and with policing to tackle this problem. And if this forum fails to lead to concrete action and concrete results, it won't have fulfilled its purpose. And that's the position we've taken from the outset.
My name is Rivka Campbell, and I am the host of the CJM podcast, Rivkush. My podcast, it's a focus on Jews of color, talking about anything. It's really important for mainstream Jews to see that I am just as Jewish as you. The topics that interest you also interest me. I want to talk about Israel. You want to talk about Israel. I want to talk about food. Maybe it's not the food you want to talk about, but I want to talk about food. It's important that the person talking about Judaism, Israel, whatever, has a face like mine. It really, hopefully, changes the perception of Jews of color. To support my podcast and the rest of the CJN, please make a tax-deductible donation at thecjn.ca/donate.
The good news is, I think that there's a lot of people out there beyond the Jewish community who feel the same way and who want to join us in common cause. So the first step is we have to come together and unite and take a stand. Because if we won't stand up for ourselves, nobody's going to join us.
So you're saying we, the Jewish community, has to speak with one voice?
Absolutely. This is a time for unity. This is a time for coordination. This is a time for us to come together. Yes, CIJA has an important role to play in all of this. We have a clear mission to make sure that governments and other public institutions are making choices and taking actions that are going to support the Jewish community and enable Jewish life in Canada to continue to thrive. But it's not for us alone to advance that mission. There are lots of organizations in this community that are doing great work, and a lot of individuals in this community who are doing phenomenal things, and a lot of people who want to do more. And we need to find a way to unify all of these efforts in order to apply as much pounds per square inch of pressure where it's needed to drive change.
But you did mention this kind of muscular grassroots individuals and community groups that have sprung up after October 7th that weren't there before. And in the chairman's of CIJA's board's recent email, for the very first time, there seemed to be kind of a new approach, a new opening to the people that wasn't there before. So tell me about the strategy.
We're either going to ride this wave together or we're all going to sink. Our adversaries want nothing more than for us to be a divided community right now. I'm not here to have influence or to exert some sort of power in the community. I'm not here to make CIJA look good. I'm here to win. My only objective is to win, for our community to win. And in order for us to do that, we have to come together and we have to all recognize that we have a shared challenge. The shared challenge is the skyrocketing of anti-Semitism. And if we don't tackle that together, if we don't recognize that we all have value and treat each other with respect to move that forward, we're not going to succeed. So it's deeper than sort of a reevaluation of policy or approach. It's fundamental for our success as an organization and our success as a community that we do this.
There has been lots of grumbling that the legacy, and not just you guys, federations, what have you, B'nai B'rith, that everybody is in their own sort of silos, and meanwhile there's still anti-Semitism on the streets. And sort of after October 7th, the big ship had to start to be more nimble. Why did it take until now, do you think, for this new thinking?
I think the stakes are really high. The stakes are really high. We're at a pivotal moment now. Look at this time of change that we're in. This is a time of significant change in Canada and an opportunity for us to make an impact. And so the imperative of us coming together to do this has never been stronger, and I'm excited to be part of that. This isn't a new approach for CIJA. If you look at the legal task force that was put together in the immediate aftermath of October 7th to support the community with legal resources and tools on a pro bono basis, that is volunteer-led and volunteer-driven and is successful on the basis of hundreds of volunteer lawyers putting their hands up and offering their blood, sweat, and tears for the betterment of the Jewish community. And I know that it's been a grueling experience, I hope also a fulfilling experience, but an invaluable resource, not just for CIJA, but for the broader community. So this isn't something that's coming out of nowhere. This has always been something that's important, but I think we need to elevate it and take it to a whole new level where it's a community-wide approach, where we're not necessarily doing everything as CIJA, but we're helping, we're convening, we're connecting, we're coaching the entirety of the community and helping us to do more together than we could do as constituent parts.
When CIJA made the announcement in December that Shimon Fogel, after many, many years, was stepping away, and you were taking the interim position, it came quite as a big shock. What happened? What precipitated it?
Well, first, I just want to make clear the tremendous respect that I have for Shimon. on a personal level, as a personal mentor. Shimon was the person who first hired me to work in Jewish community advocacy, I think about 18 years ago. And I've learned a tremendous amount from him, and he's inspired me to pursue a career in this field and to continue to fight this fight, as he has for so many. His impact on the community, on advocacy in Canada, is immeasurable. And this is the natural course of things, that there is change and that organizations evolve. It's not unique to CIJA.
So what will the change in strategy of CIJA be? The Liberals have been in power for a long time. It seems to me from your speeches that approach may be changed and you're hitching a wagon to the new government as expected. Is that fair?
No. It's absolutely imperative that the Jewish community is actively working with all political parties. Ultimately, CIJA is about advancing policy interests of the Jewish community. My goal is to be able to articulate clearly what it is that the Jewish community needs from government, whether it's in terms of the fight against anti-Semitism or the elevating the relationship, restoring and elevating the relationship with Israel, or making sure that the fundamentals of Jewish life here in Canada are protected. Ultimately, it would be wonderful if all political parties bought into those core fundamental principles that are, if not 100% consensus in the Jewish community, accrue a significant support from the Jewish community. I mean, it's not about conservative. We're not saying we need conservative policies. We need policies that are friendly to the Jewish community. We would hope that all political parties would adopt those policies as fundamental to their platform, because as far as I'm concerned, these are fundamental Canadian values that everybody should be advancing. But I don't think it's any secret that we're not happy about where the current government has taken the Canada-Israel relationship. We're actually suing the government over its funding of UNRWA.
So what happens when the government changes with that lawsuit? Can you update us quickly on where that lawsuit is?
The last update was that the government tried to quash the suit, and we were successful, and the suit is moving forward despite those efforts. So I'm very glad that we quickly overcame that hurdle, and we're waiting for the courts. Unfortunately, the wheels of justice do not turn quickly, but we're confident that that's moving forward as it needs to. If there's a change in government or a change in policy, we'll welcome that. I don't think that it makes any sense whatsoever for Canadian taxpayer dollars to be going to an organization that has been proven to be infiltrated by Hamas, by the terrorists who attacked on October 7th, and who have been diverting aid and critical resources from people who need it in order to bolster Hamas's position of power in Gaza. That should not be
hostages in UN homes, which we just found out yesterday.
Absolutely. This is egregious. And that's to my point. This isn't just about what the Jewish community is thinking and feeling. That should be offensive to all Canadians. There are other ways that we can express our support for different groups of people to ensure that humanitarian aid flows to people who need it. This makes no sense.
You mentioned glorification of terrorism, and there's been some important legislation that CIJA backed for a couple of years that we're now not going to probably see go forward in the House of Commons because of the change, including the online hate bill, changes to the criminal code. What does CIJA plan to do about all these important pieces of legislation? We
want to deal with the problem of people being radicalized on the internet. So what are some of the other opportunities that may be out there while we don't have a legislative process, or while we're trying to figure out the right balance in terms of what a public policy solution to this might look like? I think as we move towards a new government that has a legislature that's meeting, where legislation is possible, where funding of programs becomes possible again. Those are some of the questions that we're going to be bringing forward to all political parties to help us.
What about the political statement that Mr. Polyev said that if and when they get into power, they will cut the office of the Special Envoy for fighting anti-Semitism and the Islamophobia rep? What does CIJA think about this? Do you have a position?
Listen, I have a lot of respect for both Erwin Kottler and for Deborah Lyons, who have done a lot of work in their careers on these issues, not just in the position of envoy. For me, the office itself is not the issue. The issue is the impact that that office can have. So it's a vehicle, it's a vessel. If there's another way for a future government of Canada to have impact on fighting anti-Semitism on the international stage and domestically here in Canada to great effect, then that's the most important thing. I think that if the new government has a different plan for how they want to move forward to have impact in the fight against anti-Semitism, it's the impact that matters, not the mechanism, not the vehicle.
Why did you want this job?
For the community and for my children. I want to be at the front lines of this fight. I want to do everything that I can to make sure that our community has the best shot at success. We need to win this, and I don't want to be sitting on the sidelines. I want to be in the mix. So that's why I'm here.
This is your grandfather's Christy Pitts coming back. This is your Christy Pitts.
My grandfather was at Christy Pitts, and I will tell you that there are eerie similarities. In the 1930s, having swastika flags flying in Toronto and crowds marching, violence in our streets. And today we see Hamas and Hezbollah flags and flying in our streets, calls for violence, extremism, and as we mentioned, arson attacks and shootings and horrible, horrible things happening. Once upon a time, our public institutions put their foot down, banned the swastika, took an unequivocal stand, started to create the conditions for a new Canada to emerge where Jewish life could thrive. And we experienced a golden age. This is a major, major setback. Alarm bells going off for everyone. The frustration, the fear, I feel it.
The Prime Minister tweeted a couple of days ago when the first hostages were, 3 women were released, that with the ceasefire and the hostage, you saw that he hopes the temperature will turn down. That's my final question. Do you think the temperature is going to turn down with the hostage? What did you make of that?
I mean,
that's it with you.
I mean, the protest groups made it very clear that the temperature was not going to go down, and the experience thus far has confirmed that. The reality is the hate slogans, the calls for violence in our streets have absolutely nothing to do with what's going on over there. It has to do with what's going on over here. If you're serious about fighting Jew hatred in the streets of Toronto, in the streets of Montreal, in the streets of Vancouver, in the streets of any city in this country, you have to focus on the people who are perpetuating that hate. Hope is not a strategy, and we need to go all in on quashing these hate mongers, these extremists, these people pushing and promoting terrorism and violence, targeting Canadians. This is not something that we can just brush off as a symptom of a war half a world away. This is a Canadian problem, and it needs to be solved here in Canada.
Okay, is there anything you would like our listeners to know about what keeps you up at night?
How could anybody sleep soundly? What keeps me up at night is fear that it's going to get even worse than this for my kids. And I can't accept that. I absolutely can't accept that. And so I'm going all in, every ounce of strength that I have to solve these problems, to drive forward to a better future, so that we can all sleep better at night, knowing that the Canada of our past, the Canada within which we grew up, where none of this stuff was even a thought of being possible, is the Canada that we're going to have one day again in the future. You know, it's incredibly encouraging to see our community coming together, finding common cause, and everybody finding their voice at this time. I mean, there's a fight or flight reflex when you're threatened. And I think I'm here in Canada today because my family were fleers and they got out of there. I am so impressed with the fight response of this community. And if we are able to harness that energy effectively and drive forward, there won't be any need for anybody to ponder flight from this country. And we can build a better Canada, not just for us, but for everyone going forward. We have a federal election coming, Ontario election coming. This is an opportunity for everyone in our community to help shape the country, to help shape our democracy. And if we don't participate, Others will, and they're going to take it in a different direction. So right now, as a minimum, everyone in our community should commit to vote. And if you're willing to do more than that, get involved in partisan politics. Don't be passive, be active.
Thanks for being on the CJN Daily, and good luck.
Thanks so much for having me.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Although Shaq maintains CIJA is not partisan and can't be, we did notice that just a week after he took the job, CIJA issued a post on social media of congratulations to former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland for her service shortly after her bombshell resignation. That post was removed after criticism from Melissa Lantsman, the deputy leader of the Conservative Party, who pointed out that Freeland's government has taken anti-Israel positions since October 7th. Meanwhile, CIJA has not publicly congratulated the new Montreal Liberal MP Rachel Ben-Dayan either, after she was named to the Liberal cabinet on December 20th. Our show is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. Our executive producer is Michael Freeman, and our music is by composer Dov Beck-Levine. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Avi Feingold. I'm the co-host of Bonjour Chai on the CJN Podcast Network and a contributing editor for the CJN magazine. Bonjour Chai is Canada's weekly Jewish discussion and debate podcast. We discuss the issues that are important to Jewish Canadians. The stereotype of Canadians is that we either all agree with each other or we disagree and we don't want to talk about it and we don't fight and we don't argue. We do our thing quietly and off to the side. And it's not always true. I like to think that Canadian Jews have strong disagreements, but that are respectful about it. I think historically that has been the case. And hearing two people disagree in a loving, friendly, idea-based sort of way, hopefully is a model for other people to have these conversations themselves. And I think it's important for people to be able to hear these things. We can't do this without your support. Your donation goes a long way to helping us bring you the stories that you want to hear. Please visit thecjn.ca/donate. And if you're Canadian, you can even get a tax receipt.